got us.
We have a quorum. Let's go.
Sorry, this is much of a. All right, board members. What? The size of my snack plate or what? It's okay.
She made her happy. It made her happy.
I've only got one soda can so far. Wait till it's combat pay. You get the double. All right. Let us get back on the record. I think we've got everybody. We're missing member Carey. And okay, he's right in front of me. Sorry, I just want to make sure you knew we were going. Want to make sure everybody's got notice. All right, back to our agenda, and we are on to finance. Chair Norton, take it away.
Thank you, Chair Moss. The Finance Committee in November 3rd, had several different types of action and resolutions brought forward. And you can read about those in the backup. Discussing the motions that are brought directly before the board, which tied together with many of those actions. The first one is that the committee recommends that the board recommend to the legislature to consider consolidating the elementary school counselor program and the student health and counseling support program when presenting the allocation for elementary schools through the application process.
Okay, comments, questions? Member Lear?
Go ahead. I just want to know what item you're on.
Sorry, thank you
Let's
very
see
much.
this.
We're on item 5.3, and you can see that
Okay.
in the,
Point 4, I believe.
For trust lands.
yes, 5.5.
3 had no action, so we're
Yeah,
skipping
we had
the trust
a lot
lands.
of no
Action.
actions, right.
Okay.
These were all the related to basic program review and recommendations
Okay.
from the legislation, and we were asked to weigh in on those. We have made our recommendation now to the full board, so that now the board can recommend to the legislature how they feel about that.
And one just further clarification to that. So when you say there was no action, like on 5.3, does that mean you couldn't agree?
No,
or-
no. They were not. They were. For instance, the resolution
Okay.
for the trust
Trust
lands.
lands.
We asked the trust lands group to go over a few of those items and some of that language and work on that, and then bring it back to us, and we'll look that over before we bring that to the board.
That's super helpful.
And that's on for tomorrow. Vice Chair Hart?
I'm so excited to see motion 1. I just firmly believe we should be streamlining things, and when we have 2 separate programs that sound the same to constituents and practitioners, it's our responsibility to make it streamline it, make it easier to understand, make it easier to fund, I think, in some ways. So support of the motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hart. I'll just say this was I think a great opportunity, is conversation with the legislature where they're looking at the minimum school program over the interim period. That was one of the topics they identified for discussion. Looked at what was above and below the line, made some suggestions of their own that they've been considering, and then specifically asked us to weigh in. So good opportunity for us to be partners in that process of evaluating opportunities for efficiency, streamlining, et cetera, flexibility. So that's where these came from. We had a really good discussion about a number of items that were discussed in interim education, and these are the ones that came out of that committee discussion for action. So any further discussion of that one? If not, the motion is that the board recommends to the legislature to consider consolidating the elementary school counselor program and the student health and counseling support program while preserving the allocation for elementary schools through the application process. And seeing no lights. Oh, do we have a light? I'm sorry. Member Klein.
Sorry, I'm just
There we go.
wondering if somebody can explain to us what the key differences were between the two before we put them together, so we know kind of what's coming together. There was no difference, or
There is a difference.
I would like to know what the difference is.
Yeah.
Chair Norton to delegate to staff.
Yes, go ahead, Deputy Superintendent Stallings.
Hold on, we gotta get somebody off. There we go.
Good morning. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent Policy. I don't know, I'm not able to answer that question directly, but we do have Michelle Galetti here who could speak to that if you would like her to approach and answer.
Thank you. Yes, please, Michelle. We would appreciate that. And then push the, looks like a little person down the bottom and wait till it goes red.
Good morning, Michelle Golightly. I'm a school counseling specialist here, and I oversee the elementary school counselor grant program. We also have Ashley Lauer, who is overseeing the second program in this. So there are a few key differences. The elementary school counselor program grant is only for elementary school, so that's K-6. The other program is K-12. There are also some differences in what the funds can be used for. The elementary school counselor grant is just for school counselors or school social workers. The other grant has a longer list and includes contracted services. The amounts that have been allocated are also very different. The elementary school counselor grant is $2.1 million, and the other school health and counseling is $26 million. And there's also a 50% match requirement from the LEA in the elementary school counselor grant.
Quick follow-up. Well, you got your own follow-up. I'll come back to mine. Go ahead.
It's, take.
So it sounds to me like they're actually fairly different, but the student health and counseling support program is just subsuming the elementary program. Would that be an accurate description?
Yes.
I think that's probably a question that she's not necessarily, it's more of a policy call, but I think there's a risk personally once you take a large program, combine it with a smaller program, that the larger program could kind of take over. Also, I think this is just elementary school counselors in general are not as common as counselors in the secondary arena.
So I would just say that I would be against this.
I'll just add one point of clarification, then Member Boggs is up. The motion indicates, refers to this, that the allocation for elementary schools be preserved through the allocation process. So we did talk about efficiencies and streamlining of management operation, but there was a desire to protect that amount that goes to elementary school students. And so that was decided through the application process that would be protected, but there would be the efficiencies of combining it for other purposes, as I understood it, correct? So that part that's currently going to elementary would not be necessarily diluted, if I'm getting that right. I don't see any shaking of head, so thank you. Member Bogus.
So just a couple things. I forget the year exactly, but I believe it was about 5 years ago. There was a bill passed through the legislature that offered counselors in every elementary school. In fact, many of our schools in the district I'm employed in have 2 counselors in the elementary school for every so many kids. I think it's 250. And so we have multiple counselors in our schools. I did vote against this in committee. I am still opposed to it. I think combining these two blur the lines of family and state. I think it blurs the lines of family and home, and it's just not in the realm and place of what I would consider the proper role of school. If parents and families need these services, I think that there's a way to support them, and I just don't believe that this is the way to do it. Thank you.
I have a couple.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl.
I apologize if this was answered already. The program doesn't go away either way, right? It just combines them so there's less red tape, less, right? The reporting is a little different. Am I missing something? Leaving it the same does not take the program away. Is that inaccurate? Right, they're putting the programs together. So it's financially, and then the reporting mechanism wouldn't be two separate reporting mechanisms, right? It would be one, if I'm understanding this correctly, I just want to make sure it doesn't take the one away from the other, right?
Can I, while we're figuring that out, can I add to that question?
Go ahead.
So voting against this just simply means that both these programs stay separate, and our schools and LEAs are expected to still maintain two program paperwork, staffing, all the things associated with it. If they
That's
go
what I'm asking.
together, I would assume that they would have to do some policy rewrites in order to make them work together. So by voting against this, you're preserving the status quo. By voting for this, you open up the option that adults in the school system are spending possibly less time managing these programs in a more efficient and effective way. So just to point out that we are not voting on the programs themselves. We are voting on whether or not they are consolidated as part of a line item. Is that correct? I see. And we're just recommending to the legislature. We're not looking at our rules. We're not looking at policy, a statute. We're just recommending that they look at this program, these programs together. Yeah.
Vice Chair Earl, Hart, I apologize. We are trying to text a friend, Scott Jones, but I have his phone apparently, so that's not working. So I don't know if you want to move away from this item while we find Deputy Jones do you feel? Okay. Okay.
Sam Uri, School Finance Director here at USBE. That is my understanding, Chair Hart. Is that correct? If you were to vote for this motion, you would then forward a recommendation to the legislature to combine those programs, and it would require some policy rewriting. That's correct.
I'm good.
By Cheryl. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
Member Carey and then Member Straight. You got the list, right? Am I getting it right? Okay, Member Carey.
Thank you. Chair, may I pose a question to staff?
You bet.
Okay, thank you. So as I meet teachers and educators, I've yet to have a elementary school counselor or student health and counseling counselor or employee ask for a consolidation of these programs. Never bumped into either of those two groups, and someone has said it would make a lot of sense to put these together. So in my experience, it's not coming from those parties. Is this viewed as a cost-saving measure? Where is the impetus coming from to combine these programs?
Sam or Deputy Jones?
Yeah, if I may, a lot of this discussion has happened in the Public Ed Appropriations Committee, an effort as part of a larger effort alongside our own reporting and requirements task force to identify certain programs, and certainly within the related to basic area of the minimum school program, items that just deserve further study, whether we can combine those without, having negative effects on the counseling programs. And so that's really the genesis of this whole discussion.
And may I, Chair? Yes. I just want to say thank you. You didn't have to come up and sit in that seat and take a whole bunch of unexpected questions. So thank you for that. And thank you for the answer.
Member Straight?
So I've decided better that I take my questions offline.
Member Klein, and Deputy Jones has joined us. Did you want to weigh in or just wait to see if we have a question? Okay.
Sam did a good job.
Indeed. All right. Just want to make sure I respect if you were wanting to jump in. Member Klein.
So would it be called the Student Health and Counseling Support Program after they're combined or something else? Just curious.
It would stay with that. May I, Chair? It would stay with that title. However, we could, if you, the board, would want to direct this, we could look at a different title for the items that are funded. If that's an issue, this would be the time to do just that. Does that help answer the question, Chair?
Yeah, thank you. And I think to Member Carey's point, there are a number of these, items that really are on the administrative oversight efficiency side of things. So it's not so much, you got transportation, DTL, and so it's not really meant to affect the daily operations, and the folks who are doing what they're doing will keep doing what they're doing. But it should reduce some of those kind of reporting and oversight things in a way that's more efficient. That's the idea. That's what these have in common, because you'll see others that have nothing in relation to counseling. But that was the extent of the motion, at least, unless there are other suggestions for the body. Like Deputy Jones said, we could entertain those here and take action if somebody wants to propose. If not, any other lights? Seeing no other lights on that one, we can vote. The motion is that the board recommends to the legislature to consider consolidating the elementary school counselor program and the student health and counseling support program while preserving the allocation for elementary schools through the application process. That vote is now open. Please vote. That motion passes 10-4 with Member Davis absent. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. I got to read the no's are Member Bogus, Member Klein, Member Green, and Member Carey. Okay, back to you, Chair Norton.
Thank you. There are actually 5 of these items, and if it helps you in any way, I look at it as a filing cabinet, and some of these manila files we're putting in hanging files, and some of the hanging files we're putting in bigger, and it's just more a record-keeping type of movement. So the second of the 5, the committee recommends that the board recommend that the legislature continue the digital teaching and learning program as a separate funding item.
Discussion to that motion?
We're still on the same
5
item. I'm on page 3 in the agenda, if that helps any. But this is 5.4. There's a bunch of committee actions, and then it gets down to motions for the board. That's okay.
So I can just add the discussion there, as with the others, was, do we roll this into WPU? Do we change the reporting, other requirements? After discussion, the sense of the Finance Committee was leave it as it is. So this was, they recommend continue the digital learning as a separate funding item. Why point it out then? If the motion is just to preserve the status quo, it's because PEA invited our input. And so we wanted to let them know that we considered it, and this is our recommendation as to the course going forward. But we can discuss that here. Member Bogus? You bet.
Jones, you and I shared some dialogue about this line item.
Yes.
Shortly after the last board meeting. And and then those conversations offline with my constituents continued. And I just want to clarify that this is not funding for computers. It's funding for programs. And I want to just make certain that I'm clear on that, and that my constituents are clear that we're not talking about tech. We're not talking about smart boards. We're not talking about all of that stuff. We're talking about programming. Would that be a truthful statement? Could you clarify or maybe even restate so that I...
Chair, if I may.
Deputy Jones, yeah.
So my understanding, okay, so let me just add some additional context real quick, if I may, Chair. these 9 related to basic programs were not put into the base budget by EAC on Tuesday because they want the PEA to Public Education Appropriations Committee to further study where the, if we need to change the distribution, the amounts of the funding. And this is why you are doing exactly what is needed is, being part of the process of advising the legislature from your perspective, what you want to do or not do with this funding. So in this particular instance, we're saying pretty much, if I understand the motion correctly, leave it as it is, right? Leave it as a line item. Don't roll it up into the WPU. And to specifically answer Board Member Bogus's question, it would be used the same way it's used now. That funding would be used for the digital teaching and learning program as it is used now, which my understanding is not for the things like you're saying. It's not to change it for its use. It's not to do that. It's to keep it as a line item and recommend to the legislature or the legislative body that it not get rolled up into the WPU or it not be used for other things. I mean, you could certainly do that, but that is my understanding, Chair, in my response to Board Member Boggett.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. Thank you. Vice Chair Hart and Earl, who's up first?
I make no secret of the fact I think things should be streamlined, and I don't agree that the digital teaching and learning should be a separate item. It should have been a separate item when it started because we needed to do quite a bit of legwork and encouragement and very specific planning for digital teaching and learning. Now digital teaching and learning is rightfully, instead of a major focus, it is a tool, one tool in the toolbox. The reason that you don't hear practitioners, say counselors or digital and teaching learning teachers, is because they don't do the work for the grants and the paperwork and all the requirements for these types of programs. That's what bureaucracy does, and we need to limit our bureaucracy. That's a known problem in education everywhere, and we have opportunities to streamline it, and this is a really big one. And I'm not saying that digital teaching and learning couldn't be a subset of somebody's improvement plan or some other plan or land trust plan, but I am saying that when I go to insure my house, I don't insure my doors and my roof and my windows. We breaking them out into their pieces parts is why we have administrators doing paperwork instead of monitoring teachers and students and climate. So I disagree.
Deputy Jones, and then
Go ahead. Then I'll.
Chair, I'd like to, your direction, go back to Board Member Bogus's question. From the code, as funding allows, the state board shall develop a master plan for a statewide digital teaching and learning program, including the following: a statement of purpose that describes the objectives or goals the state board will accomplish by implementing the program, a forecast for fundamental components needed to implement a digital teaching and learning program, including a forecast for student and teacher devices, Wi-Fi and wireless compatible technology, curriculum software, assessment solutions, technical support, change management of LEAs, high quality professional learning, internet delivery and capacity, and security and privacy of users, and a determination of requirements for statewide technology infrastructure and local LEA technology infrastructure. And without reading every word, we also consult with UETN on this. So I just want to make sure that by going through this list, I address Board Member Bogus's questions from the code specifically. So while the code does have you as the board come up with that master plan, it can be used for these. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be, but it would be part of your direction in your master plan on how the funding is used along that code for, compliance purposes. I really felt that was an additional value add to her question, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. Vice Chair Earl, we skipped Jenny. Back to Vice Chair Earl.
What was my question? I should have wrote it down, huh? Then I went to two other questions since then. Oh my gosh. All right, come back to me.
Member Straight, and then back to.
Thank you. I cannot remember when we had this discussion as a committee if the money is indexed, if the WPU, if something is in the WPU, if it goes up 5%, then everything in the WPU goes up 5%. For our digital teaching and learning, if it's separated out, which it was, is there any indexing to digital teaching and learning? See, and that's why, in many respects, I think it should be added in, because it is something that impacts the education of our students. And so I guess that's the advantage.
Deputy Jones.
So to answer Board Member Straight's question, no, it's not indexed. Here's the thing that I think is a value add for your consideration as decision makers, right? Whenever we look at the potential of rolling up funding into the WPU, so say you have a particular amount of the appropriation that's going right now, that appropriation may be going for 30,000 students. When you roll it into the WPU, that amount technically can be spread out among 600,000 students. So there is that piece of it that that we can provide you the analysis of, well, for decision-making purposes, oftentimes line items are intended just for that reason. Is it, and this may be too strong a word, it targets specific groups or is intended for use by specific groups. And I'm not saying this is wrong or anything, I'm not taking a position at all, but when you look to, a decision on whether or not to roll it up into the WPU, please consider that money, if it's not increased, it could be indexed as part of that. Maybe not, it would be, actually it would be, if it is rolled into the WPU. But that money technically could be perceived as not benefiting as many students as it did, because it's less money when you divide it 600,000, or, if it's for certain grade bands, those amounts of students into it. Just for Chair, just for the board's consideration about, making decisions on supporting, rolling it up, those types of things too. So that all comes into play to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. Other lights? I see Superintendent Dixon.
Do you remember your question?
I did.
I'll default to Vice Chair Earl
So
first.
my question has to do, when I looked at the numbers this last weekend, EAC, their recommendation is to put this into flexible allocations. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding that. So that is still a line item, or it is not? Does that make sense? Is it separate, or would our motion be that? I don't think so, right?
Director Yuri.
And I think generally what's important to realize is even if the same amount of money makes it to the flexible allocation, it is then flexible and not restricted. And so then if you take $20 million from digital teaching and learning and put it to flexible allocation, while it can be used for digital teaching and learning, it may not be, just depending on the needs of the LEA. And so just another one of those. The other consideration is that, at times during budget shortfalls or things, the flexible allocation is an area that's looked at first to be reduced.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Chair Moss, can I go?
Yes, back to Superintendent Dixon.
Thank you, Chair Moss. So this is more of a comment, and it dovetails nicely with the question that Vice Chair Earl just asked. I think one of the dilemmas that you have as a board, we certainly have this as staff. You know, you want to maximize dollars going to schools that are flexible. I mean, I think we've had that conversation enough to know that it's nice to keep things at the local level. At the same time, when you move line item programs into whether it's the WPU or flexible allocation, and you take off those restrictions, you also take away the program. So the code that's attached goes away. And I think that's something to be aware of, again, for your decision-making purposes. And that's not always part of the conversation. We talk about the reporting requirements and how those could be diminished. Yes, I mean, that would be awesome to have less reporting. We talk about the need for flexibility. Yes, that's awesome. But also we have to acknowledge the reality of programs that have not only put us on the map, but helped us. When we think about digital teaching and learning, we were the only state to not go down in 8th grade mathematics because 70% of our kids, in part, this is not all of it, but in part, 70% of our kids could be connected during those 3 months when we were shut down. We also had some good professional learning around mathematics for our teachers using technology that helped. But we created a framework that was a bipartisan, broad community effort that created a framework that we've used for other initiatives. And I'm not just tagging digital teaching and learning, trying to help the board understand what happens when a program goes away. So with digital teaching and learning, for example, we had a framework where it was implementation, money went for planning, implementation, and maintenance. And oftentimes things get imposed on the board from the legislature that then gets imposed on schools where they don't even have time for planning. So our digital teaching and learning framework has actually been used as a model for other line item items, other grant programs that come forward. You'll see that replicated for schools to be able to have time to plan with their communities to then implement and maintain and evaluate. So digital teaching and learning is an example, and there are others that you will talk about. And I just think it's important to put that on your radar, that if you move those into a WPU or a flexible allocation, programs go away. Like the code that outlines the program goes away. And what does that mean for our schools and for you as a board? So I will quit preaching and sum up.
Thank you, Superintendent. Back to Chair Norton.
I have a question, if that's okay. And I just need some clarity here, but from the way I understand it, and I think as has been mentioned several times, digital teaching and learning is a very good example to be talking about right now, because in the early 2000s when digital teaching and learning came on, it allowed the legislature and the board to focus money on a specific need. And that's one of the things that these types of programs do is, you know, when our world is changing into this rapidly growing digital world, we needed to amp up the teachers' knowledge, the students, the equipment, all of those types of things. And now going forward, you know, we've done a good job in our state. We still need to do some more work in our state, but maybe not to the extent that we did, like I said, in the early 2000s. But instead, we will have a new need. And so it allows us to rate, I'm going on, but this really is a question. It allows us to provide our funding precision into an area and then increase or decrease as needed, and then allocate into another area as we see those needs in education changing, as opposed to putting it in a WPU, indexing it every year, using it for the entire state all at one time. And there's most of our basic programs are like that, but there are some that are targeted and different, and I think that's what this was intended for. Is that basically correct?
Deputy Jones.
Yes, Chair, to answer a board member's question or her thoughts on this, the answer is yes. That's, I would safe to say that's what it was designed to do. Just if I may, real quick too, on clarity, with the DTL money, most of it goes to positions, right, within the LEA. So, you know, in consideration as well, sometimes, and you know, we use terms like second and third level effects of decisions. To the superintendent's point, it also may result in, by moving it up and then less money than what an LEA was seeing from that particular line item or approach, may actually make the LEA make a decision not to continue to fund positions or, you know, those types of things too. So there's a lot of things, second and third level effects with any decision that's made. So, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl?
Yeah, as I'm taking this in, there's two things that stand out to me. Yes, I think you're right. There was a need to get behind it, get going, right? The concern I have is that now our districts, I think, understand the priority that needs to be here. And now I'm concerned that we may be continually directing them instead of them owning it, right? It's us continually out there directing it versus them saying, you know what, this is the priority we have for technology. This is the priority for this school. And I would rather they took the ownership in it. And I understand there's going to be different impacts. And if we spread it out, there's going to be different impacts. But as long as we're owning it, we're the ones directing it, right? We pick and choose what goes forward. And I'm not suggesting we're doing anything that we shouldn't be doing. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying they need to be owning it and making those decisions that impacts their technology. So I would be for moving it up. But anyways, that's my last comment.
Member Bogus. Oh, wait, did I leap in the line? Sorry. What's our order here? Member Straight, then Bogus.
I was a yes in committee. I'm still a yes. I appreciate my questions being answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Member Bogus.
So may I query Superintendent Jones again, sir?
You bet.
Superintendent Jones, you mentioned the second and third level effects, and though districts can choose to eliminate positions, this would not require them. Okay, I just wanted to clarify.
Chair, if I may, to answer Board Member Bogus's question, you know, transparently and publicly, no, it doesn't necessarily mean they would have to. However, you know, a decision to roll this up into the WPU or put it in the flexible allocation, from my just top level analysis would be that it would likely affect your smaller districts more, right? Who, you know, may get less money and we're, you know, stretching, so to speak, in the first place to keep those, you know, or hire those positions. I also think we would be remiss if we didn't also, and I believe this is related to Vice Chair Earl's points that she just made. We have this AI thing coming on right now. I mean, there has to be some attention, I think, brought to that. So, and I think you're going to hear more and more about it in the legislature as well. Whether or not it resides in the DTL universe, I'm not sure, but there, you know, there's certainly a lot of technological emphases that we're going to likely see in the future or not. And the, you know, the board will certainly be able to make, you know, decisions along those lines as well. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Deputy Jones. I don't want to sidetrack, but maybe just one quick clarifying question. Can you just, for the board, the difference between rolling it into the flexible allocation and the WPU in terms of either indexing for increased amounts or the parameters on use? I think I know, but it's always good to be reminded because we have a few of these that are on here and that comes up a lot.
So, Chair, to answer your question, I think it's, you know, consulting with Sam, our school finance director, rolling it into the WPU pretty much makes it an automatic indexing, right? With the flexible allocation, not so much. You know, that money would go into the flexible allocation, but then to his earlier point, there's less restrictions on the use of that money. In this case with DTL, and back to the superintendent's point, which I hope I'm, you know, adding on to it, is with DTL, and if it were put in the flexible allocation, I don't see how they could not have to change the code as well, right? Because right now it's pretty much restricted to, hey, it's in accordance with the board's master plan, right? So maybe not. Maybe they wouldn't have to change the code, but I think there is a difference, to your point, of rolling it up into the WPU seems to automatically create an indexing, whereas the flexible allocation not necessarily. So,
And just the second part, if it's in the flexible allocation fund, is it entirely unrestricted, or is there more restriction on it than in the WPU?
I would say there's less restriction on it. However, back to the superintendent's point, it really depends on what the code is for that particular program, whether it needs to be adjusted, and that would create the flexibility of or with putting it into the flexible allocation. Typically, what we've seen is when programs are moved into the flexible allocation, which has been a while. Last year it was the school nurses and library materials, right? Was that it? Yeah, right. So then, were there any code changes, Angie, as a result of that? Do you know? I can't remember. So, but sometimes that might have to occur. Yeah, okay. So it doesn't necessarily mean they'd have to change the code, but it certainly does allow for a lot more flexibility than it otherwise would be, where you might have such a restrictive line item. So.
Okay, thank you. Follow-ups, let's move on. Thank you for that. I just think that's kind of a good macro level reminder. Okay. Any further comments or questions? If not, the motion is that the board recommends that the legislature continue the digital teaching and learning program as a separate funding item. Voting is open. Please vote.
Who's leaving then? Oh, Carrie's the.
We don't need to call them out. Just we're waiting on the universe to give us direction. Okay, that motion. That motion fails. It is a tie vote, 7-7, meaning it fails. The no votes are Member Hymas, Bogus, Vice Chair Earl, Klein, Green, Hart, and Wood. So, okay. Yes, Deputy Jones?
What the result of the vote is then, if I understand correctly, is that the board is not recommending that the by way of it failing, the board is not recommending that the legislature continue digital teaching and learning as a separate funding item. Is there something specific that the board would like it to be? Or is that are we just going to, present that? Does that make sense? Okay, no feedback. Okay. So I hope you see the value of my asking that question, is because when I work closely with the LFA and I say, hey, the board voted not, is not in support of keeping it as its own separate funding item, they may ask, well, what does the board want to see them do, right? And what would I say to that, sir?
Well, we've taken no action other than this decision not to take action. So the floor is open if folks have other Member Straight.
Well, I'm just pulling this out of the air, so it may not even be a good idea. But my thought might be that we keep it separate, but with a growth factor, because it would have some challenges for smaller districts and LEAs, like was said before, to roll it up in. Anyway, I'm just throwing that out there.
So is that a motion or a comment to get?
Okay.
So we can make a comment. Okay.
But then we have to do something about it. I mean, we'll have to go through the whole rigmarole. Okay, go ahead.
What's the rigmarole?
I'll vote.
You can make a motion or not.
Okay, I'll make the motion.
We did have a motion from the committee, which was voted upon.
So
unless the parliamentarian corrects me, I think that leaves the floor open for discussion. I don't know that we have to have another motion in order to discuss. Does the fact that the committee brought a particular motion make it okay. Do we need a motion to make it legit? Okay.
How about an amendment? Would that be appropriate?
Yeah, I think any motion.
An
Yeah,
amendment
that's
to
true. We don't
pre-
have a
okay,
pending
I guess
motion.
we,
So-
yeah.
So,
All right, so we do need something. We're hearing.
Okay, so I'll make that, and then we
Okay.
can go from there. I'm not beholden to it, so I move that that the board recommend that the legislature continue the digital teaching and learning program as a separate funding item,
oh,
but with an index for growth.
wait, we just,
I know, but it's
different.
new. It's
I think
different.
it's sufficiently different, or is it not? I think you're asking for different item. You're asking to add a growth index to
Yes.
the digital teaching and learning
Yes.
fund. So that is a different action, which I think is. I think that's. We can get a ruling. Let's see.
Yeah, but you're asking for it to be a separate funding item that did not pass. So
Right.
Well, it's
But
already
it's a
a,
new
separate
motion.
funding item. So the
It
status
already
quo
is.
DTL is a separate funding item, and we have not recommended any change to that. We voted not to recommend
Right.
yay or nay. So
And so that we
the status quo as it sits here is that, and I think if we want to make changes for putting it here,
So just
there,
say
or
that-
somewhere else,
okay.
I think that would be in order.
okay.
Tell me if not, but I think if that's the change, then that would be right to add a growth index to
Yes.
what's currently the status
And I don't know
quo.
I don't know what exactly, if that would be the same as a WPU or if it's a inflationary growth index. I'm open, but that we add an index to the digital teaching and learning.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second? It's been seconded. Keep in mind, I mean, for board members, this is a recommendation, so, you know, if there's something to be clarified, that could be done. We could do it here, or whatever we do or do not propose will be up to legislative consideration. We're not passing a rule, in other words.
it's,
Who do we have in order? Do you want the language of Member Straight's motion up? Yeah, that would help.
who's this? Can Greg or Angie put the motion up? There's been a point of order, Chair.
Point of order,
Member Klein.
Member Klein?
It's,
So the way I read motion 2 that we just voted on, because it didn't pass, it would be the opposite of that, meaning we would recommend that the legislature not continue DTL as a separate funding item. And so it's not that we didn't make any recommendation, it's the opposite. Because we voted down that recommendation, our recommendation is the opposite of that. So I don't believe that this motion is in order.
Well, a couple things. I mean, the first thing is it was tie vote, so meaning no action happened. It failed by virtue of a tie. There was not, right, but moving to do one thing and having it fail doesn't mean necessarily you do the opposite. I think it just means nothing changed from the status quo unless there's something opposite from that. I take your point, but there was no motion to change the status quo. There were 7 votes not to do something different from the status quo. That would take a separate motion, I think, if somebody
But
wanted
a fail
to.
is a fail.
It's a fail, which means that the proposed action doesn't happen. It doesn't mean that the opposite action was taken in this case, unless somebody tells me, sorry? Right, yeah, it doesn't preclude anybody bringing anything else, right? But it doesn't mean that we are proposing that they do something else with it. That would have to be brought as a separate
I would disagree.
action item. Who do we, is it Member Hymas or, okay, Member Hymas?
I have a substitute motion if I could.
Okay.
I move that the board recommends that the legislature roll the DTL funding into the WPU.
I second.
It's Been moved and seconded. Back to you, Member Hymas.
Thank you. This is, I mean, there's no question that digital teaching and learning is helpful. But we want to, schools should be doing this with or without this program. We're taking money, we're saying, okay, it can only be used for this. I'd like to see it go to schools that are using digital teaching and learning without going through the hoops of digital teaching and learning. I think this money can be used successfully in many different areas. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Okay, the motion before the board is a substitute motion that the board recommends rolling DTL into the WPU. Discussion of that, Member Straight.
You know, I was teetering.
You're almost on. There you are.
Oh, thank you. So I've had this debate going on in my mind about moving it up, the advantage of that. If it wasn't for the fact that it creates some winners and losers, especially among small LEAs, I would absolutely be in favor of moving it into the WPU, but that's a concern that I have.
Member Bogus.
So my question is, how does it damage small LEAs?
Member Straight, would you like to?
Well, I would respond by saying that that's already been stated on several occasions by staff members and as being
any staff want to address that in terms of the effect on LEAs, including small LEAs? Let's see if anybody wants to go on the record on this. Director Uri?
It is, but yes, the shorter answer is yes. There is kind of an enrollment-based distribution formula for the LEAs that apply and qualify for the digital teaching and learning program, but not every LEA is participating in the program, and so it will have some dilution if it goes to the WPU.
Okay, Deputy Stallings.
Based on some quick information that we just received, 41 school districts and 60 charter schools are participating in the program. So what that means is if this program were rolled in the WPU, the 60-ish additional charter schools that are not currently participating would likely now get funding, which means those that are participating will receive less than they would when it gets rolled up into the WPU.
Yes, please.
One thing I did want to potentially suggest, Board Member Hymas, if you wanted to add to your substitute, is also indicating whether when you roll up the funding into the WPU, whether you're also advocating for a removal of all the program requirements to be repealed from code. It is possible to keep language in the code and move the funding into the WPU. It's not normal for a program of this size. So for example, last year, the nursing funding that was moved from a line item to WPU, they did not actually amend the code. They kept their requirements there without the funding. I would imagine that many LEAs would especially in this case where it's a grant program, it seems like it would be a good candidate to repeal those statutory provisions if you roll it up into the WPU. But there will be quote unquote winners and losers. There will be some LEAs who are going to get more funds than they did before and some who will get less.
Vice Chair Earl?
Correct me if I'm wrong, there's already winners and losers, right? Not everybody gets the money already. You have to go through the process of the grant, you have to get approved, you have to get the training, you have to, right? So already it's creating, and I know we created a greater flexibility so that some of the smaller LEAs, it was hard for them to get the application filled out, get the training, right there. And so previously over the last couple of years, we've made it easier for them to do that. And I can't remember how we did that, but I know we did it, some magical wand or something. It was, didn't we? we made it so that they could reach out easier, right? Someone maybe could speak to that, but you don't have to. My point is we already, through the grant process, are limiting who receives the funding when it comes to digital teaching and learning, right? Whereas the other would create a LEA flexibility. I don't see why we can't still have components that in programming components, right? That aren't maybe us making the decision, but someone else. So,
Deputy Stallings.
Yep. Thank you, Angie Stallings
My
again.
apologies.
Currently, the program is structured as a grant program, and what I've been told is every LEA that applies that would like the funding ultimately qualifies. So there's not been people who apply for the funding and then they're denied. I think, Vice Chair, what I heard you stating is there could be some elements that do maintain in code about basic elements of you must have some sort of a digital teaching and learning program. Those would be new requirements that currently don't apply to the 60-ish, and I'm just saying 60 charters are, 60-ish aren't. The 60 who are not currently participating in the grant program, those would be now new requirements that they're not required under the current code, because right now LEAs are only required to participate or adhere to the digital teaching and learning program provisions if they are participating in the grant program.
Can I have a piggyback clarification on that? If it rolls into the WPU and the code section remains in place, which is currently only applicable to those who choose, how does doesn't it become a choice of the district whether to use the program and take the regulations? Do they then necessarily fall under all the requirements that currently govern the program when you apply voluntarily?
Well, and I'd really like to take a look at the sections of code and maybe answer this question offline, because it is a grant program. It's a little different than, say, the nursing, right? The code that just says, here's all these expectations for LEAs. Because it's a grant program, you would think if they're eliminating the grant funding, that they would just repeal the grant program. But the question is whether they might want to change code to still require some elements of that for all LEAs. It would really depend. There's probably a couple of different ways of structuring it. But then also, practically speaking, if it's a grant program and the only way that you're tied to the requirements is if you receive the restricted funds, maybe even without repealing the code, it kind of does away with the program. But again, I'd have to look at the exact language to make sure.
Vice Chair Hart.
So I'm not worried about code going away because I know that there's more code coming at any given time. I feel like we have to not be so afraid to remove scaffolds for LEAs to do innovative things like what digital teaching and learning was when it started. I think it's outlived its usefulness. I think that many small LEAs don't apply for the funds because of the paperwork, which I believe we asked them about, and that was their response when we were looking at this in reports and requirements. We can't, on one hand, say that we're worried about additional reports and requirements and then say that we're going to keep everything the way it is. The other point that I'd like to make is that I'm a little uncomfortable with this process right here because I think it should go back to committee so that staff can gather information, and then if committee wants to bring forward a motion, then they're bringing forward a motion based on accurate information and staff guidance and other intelligent input. Not saying that this isn't intelligent, that's not what I meant at all, but we might ask people in the field, we might ask different stakeholders. I just feel like that's a better use of our time, and I think there are a lot of things to consider. And I do understand what we're trying to do. We're trying to protect moving forward, but we're also at the same time trying to make things continually better for our LEAs in the time that we're at now, not 15 years ago. So I don't know how to turn that into a motion or if it needs to be a motion, but
So there's some options.
What can we do here?
You can move to send back to committee, you can move to postpone
but it's already a
consideration.
substitute motion.
Well, can a substitute not, I think you
I
can
don't
still
know.
have a motion while a substitute's pending. I think you can still move to table or refer, unless I'm wrong. I guess one option is to send it back to committee, the other is to postpone to a full board consideration in January, given that the legislature is meeting shortly. That's one way to go. Yes, Superintendent Dixon.
Mm.
Go ahead. Sid's trying to talk. Can you get her on?
Oh, yeah. I was also trying to read lips.
Yeah,
She's on.
I would refer sir to AG Buse. I think she's trying to give you some direction, but I also think you could, if I'm incorrect, correct me, ma'am. But I do believe you can bring it back to finance for January and then have it heard in full board that same day, right?
That's what the motion.
So, given that we've gotten in the habit of a carryover agenda on Friday, I think she's suggesting that we could have it in committee that morning and then have it in the carryover portion of full board meeting on Friday afternoon.
The motion would have to reflect that.
Right. But, what's that? Yes, Michelle, AG Buse, were you?
Go ahead, Michelle.
I think my question already passed.
Okay.
Whether you can amend, whether you can substitute.
Oh, and I think you can refer or table while a substitute's pending, correct?
Yes, you can.
Okay, that's proper. Okay, so you could postpone, table, or refer to committee while something else is pending. So you could do either. I'm sorry, Deputy Jones, were you?
Chair, if I may add this for decision-making purposes, the key piece to this too is that the input I get on this particular program, that if it's not going to remain a line item, and obviously I haven't talked to all 156 business administrators and all that, but a preponderance of the feedback I get is they would rather see it in the flexible allocation than put into the WPU where it could be dispersed across restricted programs, or actually be specific and say it can only be put, please put it only in the K through, the basic program and not disperse it out, something clarify like that. But I think there's where if we're not going to keep it as a line item, the legislation not going to do it, the preference would be for it to go into the flexible allocation, and understanding that the risk is that, back to Sam's point, is in the historical perspective, we've seen when budget cuts occur, they occur to programs that are in the flexible allocation. So there is risk there, but there's the other concerns about where it lands, within the basic program. And if that's not specified, that could cause unintended second or third level effects.
Okay. So we could use some clarification on what parameters go around something that goes into the flexible allocation fund. I'm not sure we're clear. Is there a motion pending, or you? Did
Yes,
you bring a
I
motion,
am making
Vice
a
Chair Hart?
motion that the board, I move to postpone, that the board
Where are you
request.
trying to go? Committee or
I'm-
full board?
I want it to go to committee, but I
That's
want it
refer
to be
then.
back in the full board as quickly as possible.
So that's a refer to the committee
Yeah.
with the possibility of bringing it to the full board
Yes.
the next day. Right?
Yes,
Whatever
I
language is
move that the board
It's not
request
postpone,
the
though, it's
related to
refer.
basic program review and recommendations, agenda item be referred back to committee.
Do we, if the intent is for that to be potentially teed up for full board consideration later that afternoon, do we need to say that, or is it sufficient? Is that inherent within the referral? Yes.
Item number 2.
Right,
Yeah,
it's just
so
the
it's-
DTL.
Point of,
item.
I just think if you're going to want it heard that afternoon, then you put it into this motion, because otherwise, what we've already said, and this is over the last couple of weeks, is that if it's heard in committee, it has to go to the next full board meeting. So if we're changing that practice, it needs to be clear here, and it needs to be clear to the public. I don't think we can just say, well, just put it in committee, and then we're just going to go ahead and hear it at this point, unless we're going to do that on other things too. So I'm just saying, I want clarity on that. So whatever we're putting in this motion, if it could be heard on Friday or another day, then it needs to be said here so we all know what we're voting on.
Right. I think that's the intent, right?
Yes. Yes.
I want the language.
I just don't know how to put that in language.
Does that capture the motion? Does that capture your intent
Yes.
of the motion?
That does. I think I have was there a second? Yes. Angie has an issue with it? Okay.
We don't have a second yet, but we've got it framed up.
You second it?
We do have a second. Okay. So this is before the body, so it's open for discussion. Yes, back to you, Chair Norton. Or is that, am I following the right order here?
No, you've got.
I'm sorry, let me get the right order.
Straight, Norton.
Okay.
Hymas.
Hymas.
Spear, Norton.
Thank you, Chair. I can support this motion. I'd prefer to take care of it right now, mainly, but I understand there's deeper understanding to be involved. The thing is, I mean, we've during this discussion, I believe it's come out, if I heard correctly, that every school that has applied has been granted acceptance, if you will. Right? They've been given funding, which tells me, and I know, I should say, I strongly believe that every school in the state is using some form of digital teaching and learning, which, if I'm putting logic together, they're probably not doing the paperwork because it's not worth it and they're doing it anyway. Like, this is something that every school is doing. So to say that we're only going to fund those who are applying tells me there's something wrong with the reporting process. So if this does go back to committee, please keep that in mind. Every school is tied to the internet in some way, shape, or form. And so putting this back into the hands of the schools, saying, spend it how you can use it. Use it what's best for your students, I think is the best way that we can help our schools make local choice or local decisions and do what's best for their students. So I hope we consider that. Again, I'd love to take care of this now, but if it does go back to committee, consider that every school is using this or is using digital teaching and learning, not just those who have applied for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lear.
And I'd like to know that for a fact, Matt. I think that you make a very good point, but I'd like a little more information. I am very much of Member Hart's philosophy that I think this is something that's been in place for a long time. We know from the COVID experience how crucial it is to schools, but it's why I'm reluctant to make a change like this that's pretty dramatic. When a committee's already discussed this, maybe not as thoroughly as it could have or should have, but I don't want to make it in the heat of the moment here. I think that committee needs to hear from staff what's the difference between the flexible allocation and the WPU. What are the consequences? I have concerns that nobody has raised about the winners, and we've mentioned winners and losers, but I think some of these programs, I'm generally a fan of local control. I'm generally right where you are, Member Hymas. But I sometimes think that it is the state board's role to look to protect smaller LEAs that don't have the economy of scale that bigger LEAs do. And I want to see if that's a factor in this. So I just think there are a lot of consequences to this crucial topic that need to be explored with a little more organization and depth than we're able to right now. So I very much support going back to committee. And now you have committee members, you have more questions that board members have, and you can explore those maybe more thoroughly. Thanks.
Chair Norton.
Great, I think.
Yes, I'd just like to make a suggestion. I don't want this to be a motion or anything, but I'd like a little broader input from charter schools, superintendents. UASBO we have some input from them, I guess, but I'd like a little more broad understanding.
It's on. I'd like to add my voice to what Member Hymas has said earlier, in that I think we are creating a culture of kicking the can down the road over and over and over again. We've been asked by the legislature to give them our response. We've had this for 2 months. We are going to be pushing this into a 3rd month. And I think that we as a board need to learn to get the best facts that we can, make the best decision we can, and move forward. We can put every decision off, and more and more and more I see us doing that. And I don't agree with that. I think that, it's time for us to make some decisions and go forward with that. We've discussed all 3 areas. We have talked to staff. We have heard input, and I think that we need to vote.
Further lights, Member Lear.
Question to Chair Norton, and that is in committee. What was the vote? Was it 5-0? Was it? It was 4-1. Thank you.
It's all right. We got the answer we needed. Any other comment, discussion of that motion? So the motion before the board is that the board refer the digital teaching and learning program agenda item back to Finance Committee and to the full board later on the same day as part of the board's study session. So with that, seeing no further lights, voting is open. Or is it? Yep. That motion passes 8-6. The no votes being members Bogus, Norton, Hymas, Klein, Carey, and Green. Okay, so that brings us back. That was a motion to refer. We're back to the substitute motion of member.
No, that's it. No, you don't have it. So now we're moving to motion 3.
There wouldn't be anything.
Hold on. Let me just make sure. Tell me if I'm wrong. A motion to refer or hold on. We're done? We're good? There's nothing further to talk about?
Not on motion 2.
Okay.
But you can't decide.
All right.
You don't have anything to talk about when you
I'm just making sure. I screw these up sometimes, so I'm slowing down. Make sure I don't go flying off an off ramp. Okay, nothing further on that one. We'll go forward. Back to Chair Norton then.
Okay, we're on the 4th of the 5. The committee recommends that the board recommend that the legislature holds on a decision to move the Title I paraeducators out of the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies.
Discussion to that.
Point of clarification, Chair,
Yes.
and Chair Norton. I believe we are on motion 3.
Nope.
Will you just double check that?
Correct.
You were correct. I'm sorry. Let me slide back. I put a check on the same one twice. Okay, let's go backwards then. The committee recommends that the board recommend that the legislature create a timeline to fund transportation at 100% of eligible costs in light of new efficiency models.
Any discussion there? Seeing no lights, let's vote. Let's see, that does it. Motion passes 12 in favor, 1 abstaining, Member Bogus, and 1 no, Member Klein. Okay, back to you, Chair Norton.
Okay, back to the one I read earlier, number 4. The committee recommends that the board recommends that the legislature holds on a decision to move the Title I paraeducators out of the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies.
Okay, discussion of that motion. Seeing none. Oh, I'm sorry, Member Lear.
Clarification. Until the growth of what?
Chair Norton, do we have somebody? I've forgotten.
I'm not clear what we're
Maybe
looking.
Deputy Jones.
I'm not clear what we're trying to figure out the growth of.
Could we ask Deputy Superintendent Jones?
You know, bigger Paris?
Deputy Jones?
So Chair Moss, I just want to make sure, and I think I do understand the question. So right now, so just as background, my understanding is that this money, which I think is approximately $300,000, supports paraeducators in Title I schools. So I think the growth is to grow the resources or funding to increase paraeducators in Title I schools. That's what I took away from that, but I could be
The number
well,
Paris.
which would require more funding, right, to grow, to grow the capability of putting more paraeducators in Title I schools. So,
And that is maybe is something that the feds are discussing right now. Is that the deal?
that's my understanding, is that there is an emphasis on getting more resources in the schools, which can include paraeducators. It's not only paraeducators, but I think there's more to it, especially in your schools that are TSI, CSI.
So I get it.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah,
Thank
or
you.
yes, Chair.
Thank you for the clarification.
Member Klein?
Question for Deputy Superintendent Jones. You mentioned it's not only paraeducators. Who else? Are you talking counselors, mental health professionals?
Chair, if I may. So just to clarify, for now, right? Well, I should have said in this particular instance, it would just be paraeducators. That doesn't mean there's other processes going on, but the intent of this is strictly to paraeducators. I should have stated that. What I was trying to say is there might be other things going on too, but this is intended for paraeducators only. Does that answer Board Member Klein's question or concern, sir?
Yeah.
Member Klein, yeah. Any further discussion of the motion? Okay. The motion then is that the board recommends that the legislature holds on a decision to move the Title I paraeducators out of the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies. Please vote. Oh.
I have to clarify that already out of the base budget. It was not put into the base budget. So the EAC, so we didn't know what we know now, because we know now that EAC made the motion that of the recommendation of PA to keep it out of the base budget pending this type of analysis. I just want to make sure that that's clear for the record, that it's not currently in the base budget. We didn't know for sure back when we had Finance Committee, but we now know what we know, and we know that it's not currently in the base budget. That's why I wanted to say earlier. Yeah, and that's fine. Motion board recommends holding on a decision to move the Title I pairs out of the future budget, out of the base budget. So the legislature has put, not, the EAC did not put it in the public education base budget for now, pending more analysis on that too. So if you're voting.
The action word is move it out of the base budget. Do we need to modify that to be consistent with reality?
Well, what I'm asking for is clarity on, does that mean forever? Or are you just saying
Keep it,
move it
move
out?
it.
Yeah. Do you see what I'm asking, Chair?
Yeah, I just
I
want
mean,
to get
is
the
the-
language
is the
right.
right.
So it's not in the base budget, so we're not holding
For
on
now,
moving
it's
out
not.
of it.
Doesn't mean it won't get put back into
Right.
the budget, right? But, again, at the time, so is the motion to,
So maybe it's the motion is not to recommend that it's in or out of the base budget until we, currently it's out for this year, correct?
right,
And so it would
pending-
take action to put it in. To make sure the action we're proposing kind of aligns with the current situation. So it's not currently in the base budget for this year. Is the framing then that we are not recommending that they decide whether to put it in or out of the base budget until we get growth numbers?
I have an amendment.
It's the best way to say it, Deputy Jones or
geez,
Vice
that's
Chair
good.
Earl.
I don't know, Angie, help me with wording here.
Could we say that the board recommends that the legislature keep the Title I paraeducators in the base budget until the growth is determined from new federal policies? I'd like to amend the,
It's
Does
not
that
in
work?
there. So keep doesn't work if it's not in there, does it? How do you keep something that's not there?
Right.
We would have
put
to
it
be-
back in.
Right.
Put it back in.
Is that
I
what
think,
we're-
but I don't know how to word it.
Return.
Return.
Reinstate.
Okay.
Do you have it up there for me now? What I was
don't know the right
thinking in your
word.
mind? If the board recommends that the legislature reinstate the Title I. Reinstate. Yes, because don't we, does it need to be, do I need to state base budget or? Oh, okay. Okay. Is that accurate, Scott?
So I think what we're trying to do here is we're trying to make sure that it ends up being a part of the public education budget at the end of the day. So something along the lines of the board recommends that the legislature ensure that the Title I paraeducation funding remains in the final public education budget, or
Is included in.
or reinstates. That's fine.
Is included in would be fine, right?
Yeah.
Reinstated, whatever.
I have a hard time with words that are more than 2 syllables. So, it's just, I can do numbers really well, but I don't know how to say it.
I think Angie's getting the words
She
for us.
is, yeah. That's why we're a good team.
Include, that's fine,
In
right?
the final education.
Okay.
Okay, I would make this substitute motion then. I'll
Seconded.
read it out loud. That the board recommends the legislature include the Title I paraeducators funding in the final education budget bill.
Second. Any comment? Ever real? Okay. All right, we've got it clarified. Seeing no lights, the motion then is, as amended, that the board recommends that the legislature include the Title I paraeducators funding in the final education budget bill. Please vote. Missing 2. No. Member Lear, would you like to vote on this one?
You have to walk that way.
We missing? Oh, that's it. Voting is over. It's unanimous in favor. That motion passes. Back to, let's see now, did we do that right? Did we get the amendment? And then that was framed as a substitute, I think. So we got it. Okay, back to you, Chair Norton.
Recommend, ooh, am I on? Okay. Our motion for the board is that the board recommends that the legislature move the early literacy item into the basic school program, maintaining the integrity of the K-3 early literacy program with an earmark.
Discussion of that motion? Member Wood. Oh, nope, sorry. Member Green got on first, I believe, and then Member Wood. Yes.
Does this apply specifically to the letters program, or does that's a bigger scope than that?
I don't believe so, but somebody else with more authority clarify for me. This is a separate, this is not the SB 127, this is a pre-existing program. Any staff want to make sure I'm saying that right?
If anybody wants to expound on that, that would be great.
Doing it right. Chair, sir, it is the 14 million. It is not the SB 127. So, right? Yeah. Okay. But Sarah's here to correct me if I'm wrong. So.
Brief description of what this program is as distinct from the 127 program.
Yes, thank you. Sarah Wibkey, Literacy Coordinator for the Utah State Board of Education. As far as early literacy, it has been around, like Scott was saying, for a while. I don't even know when it started. 2011? Earlier than that? 2008? 2004. Oh, before my time. We'll go with that. And so, with that being said, with those funds, approximately 96% of them are spent on like paraeducators or interventionists or literacy specialists that are supporting our students and our teachers with early literacy, specifically in that K-3 space. In addition to that, districts are also matching those funds. So even though it is the just shy of 15 million, with that being said, it's kind of double that because districts are matching within that space.
Thank you. Member Bogus, or wait, actually, nope, Member Wood, then Member Bogus.
Just a quick question on this motion. Is this motion accurate with whatever happened in EAC this week? Did they take it out, put it in? Just want to make sure that we're not having the same vote. Okay, so it's still accurate. Okay, just wanted to confirm. Thank you.
Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. So my question is it required that districts match funds to receive funds, or is it a required match?
So with that requirement, it is required that they match those funds. What that match means is there are two different programs. There's a guarantee program and a low income program, and so they're match basing on those two programs. Maybe you can explain the levies better than I can, for sure.
Can I follow up, sir? So if I understand you correctly, we're micromanaging earmarking local funds.
If I may ask a question back.
Yes, sir.
So with that, if you are meaning the matching funds, if the 14 million, whatever, were rolled up into the basic school programs, which I think is what basic school program, the matching would be, it would depend on if you're changing the language in code as well, or if it's just the funding being rolled up with the earmark. So with an earmark, typically the coding would stay the same, so the matching would be continued. The funds that are state funds are just state funds.
So may I, sir? So my question is about our current practice, not what would be coming in the future. And my question is, are they required to match funds to receive funds, or are we requiring matching funds?
Do you want to read the code? I think you already have it up.
They are required to match funds to receive state funds.
So they could forego this funding.
They could theoretically forego it. I'm not aware of any district that forgoes the funding.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you very much. I appreciate
The
you.
charter schools, by comparison, do not have a match.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Member Bogus. Not seeing any additional lights. So the motion is that the board recommends that the legislature move the early literacy item. Oh, Member Bogus.
I apologize. Does that mean charter schools don't get this money? But they don't have to match?
Correct.
Oh,
They don't
can't
have the levy, so they don't have to match. But they do receive funds.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. All right, back to the motion. The motion is the board recommends the legislature move the early literacy item into the basic school program, maintaining the integrity of the K-3 early literacy program with an earmark. Voting is open. Please vote. That voting is complete. The motion passes 13-1 with Member Klein, 13-0, one abstaining, Member Klein abstaining. Okay, back to Chair Norton.
Okay, we are now on to our final item. This is agenda item 5.5, the recommend reallocation of unobligated carry forward funds to the legislature. The USBE completed its year-end closeout process. We had about $7.7 million that is currently unobligated. And so the motion before the board is that the committee recommends the board request that the legislature reallocate a portion of the $7.7 million of unobligated agency carry forwards for priorities. Number 8, special education funding for LEAs for $1.7 million. And number 11, the San Juan School District Tribal Student Network Project maintenance at $2.5 million.
Okay, discussion to that motion. Member Bogus?
So I voted against this in committee, and I will be voting against it again. I think that getting in the business of the private sector as the State Board of Education is just not the proper role. I think supporting special education funding is a noble cause, but unless these are bifurcated, I need to stand against this motion. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing no lights, board members, please vote. Okay, voting is complete. That motion passes 10-4, with the no votes being Klein, Bogus, Green, and Hymas. Okay, thank you. Back to you, Chair Norton. Does that wrap up the Finance Committee report? Okay, thank you. Let's see. Got this scheduled for a half hour for on licensing. We got lunch scheduled for now. Do we have lunch here? Do we need to break now and then come back? That'll keep us on track. Okay, just a reminder, we have a hard stop. We internally created a policy by just a vote of leadership that we're going to have a hard stop in every meeting. Just kidding. Just wanted to get you either excited or upset that we were taking unilateral action, but we do have a hard stop, so we're going to come back and crank through our committee action and a couple other important items. So let's break for half an hour. We'll be back at, 10 after 1? Sound good? Okay.